From the gilded streets of Brahmin, Boston to the glittering social circuits of Hollywood and Palm Beach, Lucy Douglas Cochran, known to the world simply as CZ Guest, was an American original who embodied high society's elegance, yet navigated life on her own unconventional terms. Born into an old money family but destined to forge her own path, she became a figure larger than the debutante balls and gossip columns that chronicled her youth. Over the decades, she rose from Boston's Socialite to Broadway chorus girl to the country's most famous gardening authority, all while keeping an unbreakable sense of personal style and a spirit of unabashed independence. Her story, woven through the shifting tides of 20th century America, stands as a testament to a woman who understood the conventions of her social standing but refused to be confined by them. She would come to epitomize the very idea of American aristocracy, though she might have balked at that phrase, preferring to see herself as someone simply enjoying life without apology. She was born on February 19th, 1920, into the privileged realm of Brahmin, Boston, where old families held sway through discreet wealth, impeccable manners, and a centuries-old sense of social superiority. Her father was Alexander Lynn Cochran, an investment banker whose Scottish roots stretched back to the age of Robert the Bruce. He died in 1928, leaving behind a widow, Vivian Wessel, who would later marry Dudley L. Pickman, Jr. Although Dudley was from an equally prestigious background, Vivian's own lineage included a theatrical family in New York, which to the Boston Brahmins already stood out in a way they deemed suspect. In that rarefied world of parlor rooms and clubs that traced their membership back to the founding of the nation, having even a hint of show business in one's veins threatened to undermine an otherwise impeccable pedigree. That wariness surrounded young Lucy, and when her sister Nancy mispronounced sister and transformed it into CZ, the nickname stuck. From early childhood, CZ proved to be a force of nature. In an era when hyperactive or easily distracted children were not given medical diagnoses but rather stern admonitions, her teachers knew that if she wasn't kept occupied, she would find mischief. She needed constant stimulus, or she would begin chattering, giggling, or even orchestrating small pranks that tested the limits of a classroom's decorum. Her teacher's notes hinted that in a different generation, she might have been labeled with attention deficit issues. Instead, she was simply considered an exuberant child, brimming with curiosity and a determination to remain the center of attention. Her family's money, paired with Boston's discounted economy during the Great Depression, at least for those who had means, shielded her from the hardships most Americans faced. By the time she was 10, she was already learning that life could offer her anything she wanted if she was clever enough to ask. She was educated at Fermata, a girls' school in South Carolina, to which she was sent in hopes of subduing her restless nature. The plan did not exactly work. She found the light curriculum excruciatingly dull and spent more time riding horses and making new friends than hitting the books. She never learned the ordinary tasks of daily living, cooking, cleaning, changing sheets, because her world employed servants for all such labor. The result was that she grew up with an unapologetic sense of privilege, assuming that certain luxuries were simply facts of life. CZ's family background, with its flair of theatrical influences, was always suspect to the old-school Boston elite. Still, her father's lineage and her stepfather's name secured her place in that society. When she and her older sister made their debuts, they did so at the Pickman Mansion rather than the Brookline Country Club, and the decor was shockingly creative. One event was transformed into a Parisian street scene, complete with lampposts and sidewalk cafes, while another replicated a garden scene with gold satin, mountain laurel, and hemlock boughs. These parties, which lasted until dawn, an unheard-of practice for more conservative Boston families, caused eyebrows to rise. But they also announced that the Cochran-Pickman clan was different, theatrical, and unafraid to shrug off local tradition. If some were horrified, others were enthralled by the novelty, and CZ, always irrepressible, relished every moment of the attention. Throughout her teenage years, she became a favorite subject of Boston's newspaper gossip columns. Stories detailed her attendance at ballets, skating extravaganzas, and tennis matches, and there were persistent rumors that she dated various sports figures, including some of the Boston Bruins players. A pivotal moment came in December 1936 when she and her mother attended a performance of Jane Eyre at the Colonial Theater starring a young Katharine Hepburn. Hepburn was herself a product of an affluent background, although she believed fiercely in discipline and hard work. CZ, by contrast, had never thought one needed to toil for success. Entranced by Hepburn's stage presence, she decided she, too, might want to pursue acting. The notion was perfectly in line with her spirited approach to life. If something appealed to her, there was no reason not to follow that whim. She began cultivating acquaintances who could help her step into theatrical circles. And soon enough, she was being photographed with known producers and directors at social gatherings. When World War II erupted, a sense of patriotism swept across all classes, and CZ enlisted in the Massachusetts Women's Defense Corps. Even this, however, did not curb her social pursuits. She hired a theatrical agent around the same time and found minor stage roles, including stints as a magician's assistant, which caught the attention of the gossip columns. In that swirling environment, she began an affair with actor Victor Mature, who was tall, dark, and dashing, and the press feasted on the story of a Brahmin socialite entwined with a Hollywood leading man. Walter Winchell even predicted they would wed, but that never materialized. Instead, she met producer Lee Schubert, who decided to cast her in the chorus line of the Ziegfeld Follies on Broadway, hoping that the novelty of a Boston debutante turned showgirl would generate headlines, and it did. Living in a suite at the Ritz-Carlton, she lasted only 2 months before becoming bored with the routine. Her disinterest in the day-to-day slog of rehearsals and performance schedules became a pattern. When Hollywood producer Darryl Zanuck signed her to 20th Century Fox, she made only a cursory effort at auditions. Acting was, for her, another form of entertainment, not a burning passion. Still, her social connections multiplied, and she began an affair with Errol Flynn, a married actor twice her age, known for his swashbuckling roles and roguish charm. Before she could be cast in a major film role, she lost patience with the whole Hollywood system and flitted down to Mexico City. There, she had a brief relationship with a bullfighter, whose dramatic, dangerous occupation she found irresistible. The city's artistic milieu, with figures like Diego Rivera and Frida Kahlo making waves, also captivated her. One evening, Rivera offered to paint her in the nude, presumably more out of fascination with her blonde Brahmin aura than anything else. She agreed, and the resulting painting ended up hanging in a bar, a testament to how her free spirit refused to abide by society's more staid expectations. Meanwhile, Winston Frederick Churchill Guest, a distant relative of British Prime Minister Winston Churchill, had been hearing stories about this audacious Boston debutante for months. Winston was every bit the patrician sportsman, educated at Yale and Columbia, heir to a vast fortune, a polo champion who sailed with Ernest Hemingway during World War II in search of German U-boats off the coast of Cuba, and later served in the Pacific with the Marines. The moment he finally met CZ, he was smitten. She, for her part, once remarked, only half jokingly, that affairs were free rein in her world, but that when one married, it should be someone from the same social environment. Winston fit that requirement perfectly. Handsome, wealthy, and widely respected in elite circles, he was just the kind of man who could stabilize her restless nature without curbing it entirely. Their relationship progressed rapidly, punctuated by Winston's decision to purchase the nude portrait Rivera had painted of her, which he stored away to keep from offending delicate eyes. In 1947, they married in Cuba at Hemingway's estate, with the famous writer serving as best man. The ceremony was intimate and a marked departure from the lavish parties that had defined CZ's debutante days. Although Winston would have preferred a demure, traditional wife unaccustomed to the spotlight, he got a woman who cherished her independence almost as much as he valued his own. Their early years were marked by tension. The same gossip columnists who once covered her romances now speculated about whether the newlyweds fought constantly. Yet, over time, the marriage settled into a rhythm. They had 2 children, Alexander and Cornelia, though they left much of the hands-on parenting to an array of nannies, tutors, and governesses. For CZ, motherhood did not negate her desire for a fulfilling social life. Indeed, she would sometimes take her children fox hunting, believing that experiences like that were far more instructive than sitting at home with her. Old money's unspoken rules guided their public image. Winston disliked publicity, while CZ relished it. Nevertheless, she adapted, always walking a few steps behind him in public, engaging with reporters only when it was tasteful, and downplaying her rebellious streak for the sake of marital harmony. By the mid-1950s, she had become a grande dame of her generation, renowned for her impeccable style. Even as she walked her beloved dogs, a menagerie of exotic breeds and scrappy rescues, along the shore near their Long Island home, photographers trailed behind, eager to capture a single shot of this aristocratic blonde who effortlessly combined polish and casual flair. In one memorable anecdote, fashion designer Bill Blass recalled seeing her enter the Ritz in Paris, wearing a knee-length tweed skirt and moccasins at a time when all other fashionable women were donning Dior's new look. She did it not out of rebellion, but because it simply felt right for her, and her confidence made it look perfect. She landed on the International Best Dressed list in 1952 and became a fixture there for years. When asked if she might endorse a line of riding shirts, Winston forbid it, believing it vulgar for someone of their standing to monetize personal style. In their circle, the hallmark of breeding was discretion. You could wear the world's most expensive gowns, but discussing cost or publicly promoting your wardrobe for profit was tantamount to social suicide. Indeed, appearances and civility were the glue that held everything together in that stratum of society. Any open breach of decorum was immediately gossiped about, and Winston aimed to avoid that at all costs. Their Long Island estate, Old Westbury, spanned an astonishing 300 acres and was one of the largest private properties in America. For CZ, the estate was a social stage all its own. She loved hosting dinner parties, but never for more than 24 people because she believed intimacy made for better conversation. Truman Capote, Noel Coward, Salvador Dali, and the Paleys all became regular guests. Dali even painted her, capturing that cool elegance that seemed both inviting and unreachably lofty. She was known for unexpected flourishes, such as riding into the Waldorf Astoria ballroom on a white horse during the April in Paris ball, dressed as General Lafayette. It was exactly the sort of stunt that stoked her reputation as a woman simultaneously rooted in an aristocratic tradition and yet unafraid of flamboyant gestures. Beneath the glamour, Winston's finances began to falter in the 1960s. His aviation ventures proved unstable, and the debts piled up to over $500,000. To keep creditors at bay, he sold art and took out loans, meticulously maintaining a facade of unruffled prosperity. Eventually, federal agents arrived to place liens on paintings and antiques in the house. CZ, who had always believed her marriage came with permanent financial security, found herself disoriented by these developments. Winston assured everyone that the auctions of art and silver were simply a way to streamline their holdings. They sold the 300-acre estate, downsizing to a 15-acre property, and continued throwing parties as though nothing had changed. In 1976, a catastrophic riding accident forced CZ to reassess her life. The once avid equestrian realized she could not continue the sport she loved. Needing a new pursuit, she turned to gardening, a pastime she had always enjoyed but never fully cultivated. She wrote a charming book called First Garden, featuring illustrations by Cecil Beaton and a preface by her friend, Truman Capote. It was an instant hit, blending practical horticultural tips with the same breezy elegance she brought to everything else. Her willingness to poke fun at herself in the realm of gardening — she loved flowers, but freely admitted she didn't want to replace her gardener — endeared her to readers who might have otherwise dismissed her as yet another privileged socialite dabbling in a hobby. The book's success led to a gardening column in the New York Post, eventually syndicated in hundreds of newspapers nationwide. By 1982, Winston had passed away, leaving CZ a widow. With her children grown, she found that writing about gardening provided a structure and a purpose. She threw herself into it, lecturing on horticultural practices, advocating for organic solutions to pest problems long before it became fashionable, and building a small brand around her persona. Not everyone in high society approved. Some found it distasteful that a woman of her standing was engaging in such public, quasi-commercial activity. But CZ was unbothered by these criticisms, pointing out that her father's investment banking was every bit as commercial, and that she enjoyed giving useful advice that readers could apply in their own gardens. She never lost the aura of sophistication that had first captivated audiences. Her trademark blonde hair turned silvery, but she kept it flawlessly styled, and she continued to dress in a manner that was both classic and faintly provocative. She had no interest in the era's more casual fashions. Even in her 70s, she might be found wearing a crisp, tailored suit, a scattering of jewelry, and the kind of perfectly chosen shoes that suggested an appointment at a custom boutique rather than a quick trip to the department store. Her face, described by British Vogue as having the beauty of a flower, bore the hallmarks of a life lived fully: laughter lines, a graceful neck, and eyes that sparkled with the same mischief that had once led her to the stage as a magician's assistant. Her final years were filled with writing columns, hosting small garden parties, and making appearances at select society functions. Although she cut back on large gatherings, she still believed in the power of hosting intimate dinners where conversation could flow and every guest felt valued. She had always championed the idea that a party should never exceed a manageable number, which prevented any sense of anonymity and encouraged real connections among attendees. In a sense, she had come full circle from those wild debutante balls that lasted till dawn, returning to something smaller, more refined, yet imbued with the same sense of enchantment she had always loved. She died at home in Old Westbury in 2003 at the age of 83, leaving a legacy that was neither entirely defined by her social conquests nor fully captured by her forays into gardening. Friends, admirers, and even her critics acknowledged that she was, above all, a free spirit, a woman born into extraordinary privilege who reveled in it, yet simultaneously stamped it with her own brand of panache. She rode horses into ballrooms, dabbled in Hollywood, married a polo legend, befriended iconic artists, and eventually settled into a role as the most glamorous gardener America had ever seen. Hers was a life in which style, spontaneity, and tradition danced a delicate waltz, underscored by a self-assuredness that rarely wavered. In looking back on CZ Guest's journey, we observe a kind of modern fairy tale set against the backdrop of old American aristocracy. She managed to combine aspects of brash individualism, running off with bullfighters and letting Diego Rivera paint her nude, with the staid rituals of a world that prized appearances above all else. That very contradiction may explain why she fascinated so many. She was at once the rebellious debutante who shrugged off academic drudgery, and the patrician lady who would not dream of wearing the same outfit twice. She held court in places like the Ritz-Carlton and the Waldorf Astoria, but she could just as easily be found tooling around her estate in riding boots or chatting up her staff about which bulbs to plant come spring. CZ Guest may have been born into a world where her path seemed predetermined, but she shaped that path to her liking at every turn. She survived scandal, embraced celebrity, flirted with the silver screen, married an international sportsman, befriended Hemingway, devoted herself to dogs and children and gardens, and departed this life as an American original. Her name endures not simply because she was rich and beautiful, but because she crafted a unique blend of style, candor, and fearlessness that sets her apart from the archetypal socialites of her day. In her final years, among her roses and lilies, she found a tranquility that hinted at a deeper sense of personal fulfillment than she might ever have discovered in the bright lights of Broadway or the bars of Mexico City. And if some part of her still relished the applause and whispers of admiration, it was merely the echo of a lifelong performance, a performance she had directed and starred in since the moment she decided that life should always be larger, livelier, and more beautiful than anyone else dared imagine.